am watching. Some Bibles have the word ready or preparing, but the Hebrew word is watching to perform my word. The Hebrew word for almond is shakad. The Hebrew word for watching is shakad. But it's got another letter on the end of it which is silent. But there is a word play here in the Hebrew text. And he said, I am watching to perform it. Why is Yahweh's word true? Because he is faithful to perform it. Go to Numbers chapter 17. In verses 6 through 8 in Numbers chapter 17. So Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and each of their leaders gave him a rod apiece, for each leader according to their fathers' houses. Verse 6, so Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and each of their leaders gave him a rod apiece, for each leader according to their fathers' houses, 12 rods, and the rod of Aaron was among their rods. And Moses placed a rod before Yahweh in the tabernacle of witness. Now it came to pass on the next day that Moshe went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted, and put forth buds, had produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds. Life from the dead. Can we not all see that this is a picture of the resurrection of Messiah, Yehoshua? And we look at all these other things where it uses the same word about the almond. He's watching it to perform, ready to perform his word. His word will be performed in each of our lives if we walk in obedience to that word. If he promises us that these blessings will follow those if you do. But then he also said these curses will follow those if you don't. Okay? Regardless of what people think, you really cannot change what the word says. Now, we were reading in verse 20 that thou started with him in the way. Go to Matthew 6 now. If the Torah is giving us the prophecy of what's going to come to pass, and then what we call the New Testament books gives us a commentary on that which was prophesied becoming manifest, okay? Then in Matthew chapter 6, in verse 24 through 34, Messiah is speaking, and he says, no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve El and Mammon, or riches. You can get rich, or you can serve Yahweh, but you can't do both. Verse 25, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, the body more than clothing? Verse 26, look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? It's amazing people can look at Yahweh and feeding all the animals and everything, the things that he does, and they never think about, hey, he could do that with me too if if I just do what he said to do. Verse 27, which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? And you stop thinking about it. Which of you by worrying can we add an inch to our height? Verse 28, so why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed or dressed like one of these. Now if Yahweh so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown in the oven, will he not much more clothe, is implied, you, O you of little faith or trust? Therefore do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? This little thing here, so many people like to throw these things out. Well, what if you were in a place where nobody had anything to eat, and the only thing that you had, to eat there is some pork chop? What would you do? And people, oh, well, Yahweh must have sent them to me, so I must eat. I mean, there's all kinds of people who distort things, to match what they feel like they want to do. Therefore do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek, for your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. How many of us were ever told the first thing you need to seek is the righteousness of Yahweh? Then you can go out and try to get an education, build a life, or get a job, or these kinds of, how many were ever told that? But if y'all were like me, the first thing we were told, you need to get a good education so you can get a good job, so you can support your family. And then all of a sudden supporting the family becomes the most important thing, irregardless of what Yahweh's word says. And then everything becomes more important than him. Right?
The way of the world.
That's the way of the world. Verse 34, or 33, but seek ye first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. If he's saying these words to these people, where are they going to find out about Yahweh? Where are they going to find out about the righteousness of Yahweh? They're going to go in the synagogues, because Moses is being taught in the synagogues every Sabbath. Isn't that what it tells us in Acts 15? Go to Malachi chapter 3. That's that book right in front of Matthew. Malachi chapter 3. Verses 8 through 12. We've all heard these passages of scriptures read, but they've generally been applied to different things that the people that are reading them are trying to get you to do. Okay? But I'm just trying, we're reading here trying to find out actually what he says he's going to do for us. In verse 8, will a man rob El, or Elohim? He said, yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You're cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, this whole nation. He's talking to the children of Israel, right? To the people of Israel at that time. Then he's saying what? Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. What is his house? It was the temple, right?
Yes.
And he's saying bring the tithes in so there'll be food. Why? Because the tithe was food. That there may be food in my house, and prove me now in this, says Yahweh of hosts. If I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing, there'll not be enough to receive it or room with. So he's saying that, you bring all the tithe in, and he said, when you do this, then I'll provide for you. And then in verse 11 he says, and I will rebuke the devourer, well, that's hard to say, the devourer, for your sakes, so that he will not destroy the fruit of your ground, nor shall the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field, says Yahweh of hosts. And all nations will call you blessed, for you will be a delightful land, says Yahweh of hosts. That word devourer in the Hebrew text is the word that means a seed eater. What's the seed eater? Generally the birds, right? If we go back, and we'll get to it when we get into Mark today, and he talks about the sower sows the seed, and then he talks about, that some of the birds come and they steal the seed off the ground. And then he says what? This is HAFTARAH, who steals the seed. So he's going to rebuke the devourer. He's going to rebuke the seed eater. There's so many people out there today trying to find ways to stand up and fight the devil, and what he's saying is, you just do what I tell you to do and walk in obedience to my word, and I'll rebuke the devourer for you. How many people think that they can fight Satan better than him? But there's a lot of them that must think that. Go back to Genesis. We were in verse 20. He's saying, if Elohim will be with me and keep me in this way, I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then Yahweh shall be my Elohim. He made a vow, he made a deal. And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be Elohim's house, and of all that you give me I will surely give a tenth to you. Now, this is a vow that he made, and this is a deal that he made with Yahweh, and we haven't even talked about tithing because Moses hadn't come to write the Torah yet, has he? But it's something that he agreed to do with Yahweh. And the whole thing is based on, Yahweh performing and him giving back what he's been blessed with. It was a voluntary thing. So in chapter 29, so Yaakov went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. Now he'd gone, and people of the east, he's back up in Haran, where all of them came from, and they kept going back getting wives from that area. Verse 2, and he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Yaakov said to them, my brethren, where are you from? And they said, we are from Haran. Then he said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. So he said to them, is he well? And they said, he is well. And look, his daughter Rachel, or Rachel, is coming with the sheep. Then he said, look, it's still high day. Not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed. But they said, we cannot, until all the flocks are gathered together and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. So they're there with the sheep, but they're at the mercy of what the other guys do that have all the cattle. They can't do anything until they get there. The name Rachel, there in verse 6, the number 7354. Rachel. I thought this was really very interesting. It means a ewe, like E-W-E, which is a female sheep, right? It also means to journey. And when you look this up, it's saying the females being the predominant element of a flock as a good traveler.
As what?
As a good traveler. I'm not real sure how many, females are good travelers in the flock of people, but anyway. But he's talking about, the sheep really, they feed early in the day, but cattle feed late in the day. Now in verse 9 it says, now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob, or Yaakov, saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. When he saw her, he said, they ain't going to wait. This boy was infatuated from the beginning, don't you think? Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Smitten at first sight, you might say. However, now in the Pentateuch, in the Hebrew understanding, it says that when the Hebrew verb, which is the verb for kissed, okay, is not followed by the accusative case, okay, then it means kissing the hand. So that's what this is. Yeah. It would have said otherwise, he kissed her on the mouth. It would have had more explanation, okay, which is this just a respectful greeting, okay. But he's saying that, but he lifted up his voice and wept, so that the weeping is a show of emotion at the successful completion of his journey. What was he there for? To find his father's people, and he had gone there to get a wife, and all of a sudden here he was, he's in Haran, he's meeting his father's people, and there is this Rachel, and she's beautiful, and boy, he is so happy because it has come to pass. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can look at, but if you take the element out of it today, of love at first sight, then you just realize that he is really happy that he has accomplished that which he went to do, okay? So verse 12, then Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. Then it came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. Laban said to him, surely you're my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. In the Hebrew text there, he stayed with him for a new moon. From a new moon to a new moon is what it would have said. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you're my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? He'd been there for a month and he's already working for him. And now he says, should you do it for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah, the number is 3812. The name itself means weary. Weary. She must have been tired from the get-go, I guess. Now it says Leah's eyes were delicate. That word delicate there is a number 7390. It means delicate, but the implication of the word is weak. So she had weak eyes. You know, whatever that means. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. Okay? So the deal was struck. He's going to serve him for 7 years, and he's going to get Rachel as a wife, right? Now there's all kinds of things that people want to bring up, but you know, he tells him later on, you can't give the younger before the older, right? The older daughter has to be married first. But maybe he's sitting here thinking, in 7 years, surely I'll marry off the older one. You know, who knows what was in his mind when he made the deal. But in verse 20, so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed just a few days to him because of the love he had for her. That word love there is the number 160. It comes from 157. Achav. It's an affection type. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled that I may go into her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Let me tell you something right now. In Hebrew weddings, okay, that the Hebrew weddings where the man and the woman appear at the altar and everything, and she's wearing a veil, the man always lifts the veil. And the whole thing is so he can make sure who he's getting. Verse 24, and Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came to pass in the morning, and behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, what is this you've done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? Now we go back to all this, discussion that we've had before about, well, Jacob was a deceiver, he deceived his father, and therefore he's being paid back. Okay? Yeah. But the word deceived there is the number 7411. Okay? This word only appears 4 places in Torah. It's the word Ramah. It means to beguile, to mislead, to deal treacherously with. Okay? Now back over in chapter 27, verse 12, just take a quick look at that, because this is where he was talking. And he said, perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him. That's a different word in that verse. That word in that verse there is the number 8591. It's the word ta'ah. That one doesn't mean this treacherously dealing with people. It means not to be a mocker. And he's saying maybe, if he sees what I'm doing, he'll think I'm mocking. Is what he was really saying. Not in a treacherous type sense. So in verse 26, and Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. But yet, all the feast was for Rachel. All this was going through there, And he could have known, he could have told him any time, hey, you're not going to get Rachel, you're going to get Leah. So there's got to be something else. If we can get away for a little while, get away from thinking about Jacob and him being the deceiver and all this kind of stuff that's going on, what is Yahweh trying to tell us through the story of him receiving one wife, instead of the one he thought he was going to get in the first place? Yahweh betrothed the nation of Israel to himself in the beginning, right? But then that nation, did they turn away from him and go someplace else? And then he said, okay, I'm going to go. He scattered the house of Israel through the nation of the world. And he went out to call them back. But he came, and through his death, burial, and resurrection, he was able to purify them and create for himself a purified bride. But the one that he's purified is the one that he wanted in the first place, for those who would accept and receive and come back to him. So he said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Verse 27, fulfill her week. The word week is the number 7620. Shavua means week. This 7 days period of fulfilling her week then is where it always became then a 7-day period that the man and the wife spent in the bridal chamber. Okay? 7 days, a week, 7 years. There's a whole lot of comparisons as we look into what the festivals teach. So fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. Then Yaakov did so and fulfilled her week, so he gave him his daughter Rachel, his wife also. He went ahead and spent the 7 days with Leah, but then he's going to have to serve, what, 7 more years to get the wife that he wanted, but he got her on the 8th day. Okay? Verse 29, and Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Yaakov also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. When Yahweh saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now, I mean, there's all kinds of things that people can say. My personal opinion, do you hear me say that? My personal opinion is that Leah was the one who Yahweh chose in the first place, because she's the one who actually built most of the house, you know, of the whole house of Israel, all the tribes. She gave birth to both of them. How many did Rachel have? 2. All the rest of them came from the maids and Leah and so forth, okay? So in a way, this was his. Now in verse 31, when Yahweh saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. When he saw that she was unloved, maybe he thought Jacob would change or whatever. But still, he never did curse him or anything, although he had a lot of problems later on. The word unloved there in verse 31 is the number 8130. If you transliterate that into English, it's the letters S-A-N-E. We pronounce that as sane. Right? Sonne, literally it means hated. Verse 32, so Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, Yahweh has looked on my affliction, now therefore my husband will love me. He has looked on my affliction, and Reuben is a compound. The number itself is 7205, but it comes from 7200, which is the word to see, and Ben, which is 1121, which means a son. So his name Reuben means see a son. And he was the firstborn. Okay? Now, we all know later on, Reuben forfeited the birthright. Remember it said that he lost the birthright because he went up and lay with his father's concubine and all this kind of stuff. If you stop and think about something, from the very beginning, from the time he was born, Jacob didn't have the same feeling for his mother that she had for Rachel. Children can see things like that in a relationship, and maybe what Reuben did later on then was because of what he felt like, you know. Maybe in a way he was getting back at his father for whatever, okay? But it had something to do with his feelings for his mother. I'm just saying maybe that could be. I'm not trying to say that's it, but just something to think about. So in verse 33 it said, then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because Yahweh has heard, I am unloved. He has therefore given me this son also, and she called his name Shimon, or we translate Simeon, because Yahweh has heard. You know, you're given the meaning of the words in the very text. You know, and Simeon means what? Heard. So he was a second son. Verse 34, she conceived again and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi, or Levi. The number for the word attached there is 3867. I think some Bibles use the word joined.
Number again?
3867 for attached. And the number for the name Levi is 3878, and it's really Levi, and it means attached or joined. So one comes from the other. So she says, you know, maybe this time my husband will become attached or joined to me, because I've given this 3rd son, so she called him joined. which means that he's going to be the one who joins the husband and the wife. And remember, the Levitical priesthood became the ones who were joined or attached, the ones who ministered between the children of Israel and Yahweh. They were the ones who were trying to join the bride to the groom. Verse 35, and she conceived again and bore a son and said, now I will praise Yahweh. Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing. When she says, now I will praise, that's the number 3034 for praise. So she called his name Judah, which is 3063. And that means to celebrate or to praise. Now in chapter 30. See there, we're moving right along. We're going fast. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Yaakov, give me children or else I die. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel. He said, am I in the place of Elohim who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? He said, I'm not the one that can open or close your womb. So she said, here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her and she will bear a child on my knees that I also may have children by her. She's doing the same thing that Sarah did. Maybe they didn't have quite the same, effect later on. But in verse 4 it said, then she gave him Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, Elohim has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. We always see D-A-N, but the actual pronunciation would be, if it was spelled like the word dawn, D-A-W-N, as the dawn of the day. So it's dawn is the pronunciation of that name that was given to this child. 1835 is the number, and it means judge. Well, she's saying that he has judged my case. Verse 7, and Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. When you go in there and you write down the names, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, and Rachel, and all these ones, and then write down the number, the son or the daughter, whoever gave birth to them, and then come back and start putting numbers on them, who created what. And you'll find that Leah actually gave birth to 6, sons, and the daughter Dinah. Bilhah had 2, Zilpah had 2, and Rachel had 2. But who built most of the house of Israel? Leah did. The one that Yahweh had chosen up front. But I think it's kind of interesting because she was the one whom Jacob hated as opposed to Rachel, right? And look at the world today. How do they feel about the children that they call the Jewish people? Aren't they hated for the most part? And yet Yahweh said, you're supposed to join with my people and learn the ways of my people. And he told them he said, don't you go learn the ways of the Gentiles. We read those things. I don't know how people just totally ignore those scriptures and think they have no bearing anymore. Verse 8. Then Rachel said, with great wrestling I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave her to Jacob his wife. She's saying she ain't going to outdo me. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes, so she called his name Gad. Now the name Gad can either mean a troop or it can mean good fortune, depending on how it's pronounced. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher, which means happy. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me of your son's mandrakes. See, these were looked upon as a type of aphrodisiac, okay? The number for the word mandrakes is the number 1736. And it's the Hebrew word dudai. Sounds funny. Dudai. The Pentateuch described them as fruits about the size of large plums, very round, very yellow, and full of soft pulp. And even today, these things are still considered a love charm or an aphrodisiac. So he's saying, please give me of your son's mandrake. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? She's saying it's a small thing to you that he loves you more than me anyway. would you take away my son's mandrake? See, this was Reuben. Remember what I said, Reuben, in seeing all this thing is taking place between the way his mother felt and the way his father felt, all these kind of things, ain't no telling what, what caused the boy's mind to become whatever it was that he did. And Rachel said, therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And Elohim listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Rachel got the mandrakes. Leah got the son. And she called him what? Leah said, Elohim has given me my hire, because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar, which means what? My reward or my hire. And Leah said, Elohim has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah, or Dinah, or Judgment. Then El remembered Rachel, and Elohim listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son, and said, Elohim has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Yosef. The number there for Yosef is 3130, and it would be pronounced like Y-O-S-A-F-E, Yosef. And it means Yahweh shall add to me. It's the future tense word, okay? Meaning, of course, another son. And then Yosef means to add or to continue to add, okay? Remember, Joseph was the one who went down to Egypt, and then the whatever the king of Egypt was at that time, called him Yapnath Pa'aniah, meaning the bread man of the life. And that's a picture again of Messiah Yehoshua, being the bread of life. All these things, we go back and look at what these words really mean. It gives us all pictures of Messiah Yehoshua. You can't really know the Father and Son until you begin to study the prophets and the words and names and all these things and the picture that Yahweh is giving us. And then you remember Messiah said, you study the scriptures because in them you think you have eternal life. He said, yet that is what talks about me, and then here I am, and he said, and you don't receive me. So she called his name Joseph and said, Yahweh shall add to me another son. Joseph, he will add. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Yaakov said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country. Before we read verse 26, if we go back and look at the meanings of these names, Reuben was Seah's son, Simeon was hearing, Levi means attached, Yehudah is praising, Dan is judge, Naphtali is wrestling, Gad is troop, Asher is happy, Issachar means reward, Zebulun is dwelling place, Yosef means he will add, and then the last one that was born was Benjamin, which means what? The son of my right hand. You put all these things together and you go back and read these things, and they kind of tell a story. It's kind of like see a son, because Yahweh has listened. Now we'll become attached, and now we'll give praise. My case has been judged with great wrestlings, and a troop comes, blessed and happy, receiving a reward. In the dwelling place, he will add the son of my right arm. Kind of a neat story, isn't it? When you just kind of put all these meanings together, what these names say. Even in the names it tells stories. So in verse 28 he says, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you. And Laban said to him, please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that Yahweh has blessed me for your sake. Isn't that something? He said, I have learned by experience that Yahweh has blessed me for your sake. Then he said, name me your wages and I will give it. And Yaakov said to him, you know how I have served you and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before, referring before he came, was little, and it has now increased to a great amount. Yahweh has blessed you since my coming. And now, when shall I also provide for my own house? as we go back and look at this thing, he's desiring to go back home now. He wants to take his wives and his children with him. Laban knows that he's been blessed because of Jacob. He doesn't want to lose the blessing. He doesn't want him to go away. And notice in verse 31, remember what Abraham said about, when the kings wanted to bless him with all this stuff, and he said, no, you take whatever you want. The only one going to give me anything is Yahweh. But in verse 31, he says, so he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. So he said, let me pass through all your flock today. Remove them from there, all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats. And the implication is, these shall be my wages. So he's saying, let me take all these out of it, that are there now, take them away. Just leave the ones that are solid in color, and then any of the others that are born speckled or spotted in the future, those will be mine. Well, that's what they're trying to do today when they're trying to create a red heifer for those people over in Israel. And they're out there selectively trying to breed a red heifer until they get one that's perfect, right? Don't you know it'd be a whole lot more of a miracle if they got a red heifer from a speckled cow? I mean, that would really be something that, you say Yahweh did that. But anyhow, in verse 33 he says, so my righteousness will answer for me in time to come when the subject of my wages comes before you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it is with me. And Laban said, oh, that it were according to your word. But he sees that, he got a plan. So he removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them in the hand of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. 3 days' journey is like he's separated by some 60 miles. And they ain't going to go that, they're not going to get together over that distance, right? Now, these verses 37 through 43, okay, there's an awful lot of people have to, take an awful lot of meaning and understanding and everything. I'll tell you what I think that this is saying. The rods seem to be reminders of the words that were spoken by Yahweh. And then Yaakov was reminded of these words when the flocks came to drink, which is during the natural time of the conception when this takes place. It's kind of a picture then of the word becoming flesh, okay? When we get into chapter 31, we're going to actually read the words that Yahweh spoke to Jacob before this time. Everything in the scripture not always exactly in chronological order, because we're having this, and then we're going to get in chapter 31 and find out why he said what he did. And it was because of what Yahweh told him. So in verse 37 it says, now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. The rods which he had peeled he set before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flock conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Kind of sound like there's some kind of magic influence about these rods that's been peeled, right? But there's really not. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked and all the brown of the flock of Laban, but he put his own flocks by themselves and or to do you harm. But the Elohim of your father spoke to me last night saying, be careful. Did not the yet in Then Laban said to Yaakov, "Here is the pillar which